for a Jets update. Let's bring him in now. Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet Winnipeg. And before we get into the hardcore hockey talk, he's got the nice flow going. How's the summer been, Sean?
It's good. It's flow season, I find. You don't have to be quite as clean cut as when you're doing the Hockey Night in Canada stuff. So, yes, it is. Flow season for hockey players is typically in the middle of the winter. Mine is I'm right in the heart of it.
That's good. That's good. How's the summer been in Winnipeg overall?
Well, it's great. We went out west for a little bit and went rolling through Saskatchewan and Calgary and all those places, got out into the mountains, and we know all the issues that are happening out there with the fires and the smoke and all that. So I think we consider ourselves fairly lucky here in Manitoba. I think we feel it's a bit of a hidden gem here. A lot of other provinces don't really know about the lake life that we have out here, and we haven't been as plagued with the smoke as most places in Canada. So we thank our lucky stars for that.
It's interesting. I was talking to an oil friend buddy of mine from southeastern Saskatchewan talking about the wildfires, and we're putting our heads together going, something that's never happened in Saskatchewan. And we went back a long ways. So we're very fortunate about that. Sean, how long before the Jets get going? Shouldn't be too long now, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I'm a big believer. So there's a lot of people who suggest that going forward, the Jets are going to hold on to guys like Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele and carry them into the season and maybe trade them at the trade deadline next year. It's a possibility. I don't see it happening. The Jets have already come out and said that they are no doubt trying to reload. They're not rebuilding, they're reloading. What we saw from them in their trade of Pierre-Luc Dubois shows exactly that. Everyone I've talked to essentially says the same thing within the organization. And what that means is I think that the clock is ticking on moving those two players. Why? Well, if you take a look at what kind of returns you get during the season, which is very hard because trades just do not happen very often during the season, and especially at the trade deadline, which would be the next stop for when you trade these players. Let's say you're the Tampa Bay Lightning and you're trying to load up to try and win another cup, and you say, we're going to take a look at Mark Scheifele, we're going to bring him in here. Well, what are you sending back to the Jets? You're not sending reloading players. You are sending futures and adding Mark Scheifele to your team to get better. You're not trying to break even and send Steve Stamkos to the Jets for Mark Scheifele. You are sending futures. So if the Jets are truly intent on rebuilding, I think the window for that, not rebuilding, retooling, I think the window for that is closing because it gets so much harder to do that during the season and especially at the trade deadline.
I saw a comment today. Somebody said this threatens to overshadow camp, the futures of Hellebuck and Scheifele, and will they be moved or not? And I thought that would be a shame if it did. Could that happen, though?
Well, I think it can, but I also think that this is a team that is used to operating under those pressures. Like if you think back all the way to kind of the genesis, the beginning of the Winnipeg Jets in Winnipeg and the Evander Kane situation. I mean, this is a guy who behind the scenes was asking to get out for a number of years, and Kevin Cheveldayoff did not move this player until he got what he wanted for him. He got a great haul back, but in the meantime, and we know this from talking to players within that dressing room, it was taxing for the Winnipeg Jets players behind the scenes. It came to a head. We all know the big story and the tracksuit and all that kind of stuff. That's the result of Kevin Cheveldayoff keeping a player that probably should have been moved out of the dressing room in that dressing room until he could get what he wanted for it. Maybe there's a lesson to be learned in there, but if you're talking about it overshadowing camp, I think it can, and I think that can have an effect on the players, but I will dare say the Winnipeg Jets, they did it last year with Pierre-Luc Dubois. They are used to operating under that cloud of a player wanting out, making it known, and knowing that that player could be going at any time. This is just the way things go in Winnipeg under Kevin Cheveldayoff.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sean, I would love to sit sometime, because whenever I see you, it's just a breeze by, right? It's always so busy. Just to sit and talk about stuff like this. Like Chevy, his job's to assemble a talented team. He's done that. Right? They were a playoff team last year. And in terms of where the lines all slot in, because people are asking me today, who's the second line center of the Jets? I'm like, there's so many good, exciting young pieces there. That's what training camp's for. There should be an exciting time for the Jets, not have a dang cloud hanging over it. And I think Chevy's done a good job.
Well, I agree with you, and I think he's done a really good job of putting together assets. And I think the cupboards got a little bit bare there for a while as the Jets figured they had the core and the nucleus they needed to compete and win a cup. It didn't turn out that way. I think what Kevin Cheveldayoff is not lacking when it comes to assembling talent on his roster. I think he was lacking in the way of kind of putting his finger on the pulse of what was happening in the dressing room and trying to keep, the culture right in the dressing room, the chemistry right in the dressing room. But he has kind of reloaded here. There's some young pieces to get excited about, which is why, Rod, for the life of me, I can't understand why the Jets are so loath to go down the rebuilding path. I really do think if you take a look at the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, you get 3 players back, and I understand what the Jets are trying to do. They've had a lot of talent in the past. They're trying to get to be a harder team to play against. I say they look like they're trying to go down the road of a team like the Seattle Kraken, right? Harder to play against, not as deep when it comes to talent, but a team that's just harder to play against, grittier, and may take you deeper into the playoffs. I think that they achieved that with those 3 players, but I don't think that, with the 3 players that they get in return for Pierre-Luc Dubois, you're kind of hitting the heights the way that you did with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and conversely with, Jack Roslovic and Patrick Laine, who you needed to move to get Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think the only way you do that is if you kind of swing for the fences, take the chance and move a player like Scheifele and Hellebuck for some future assets that could be the next big thing. I don't think if you're retooling, you turn those players into the next big thing. I think you turn the Jets into a hard to play against team, and maybe that's where they need to go. But I do think, especially with 2 big assets like that, there should be room to swing for the fences if you're moving Hellebuck and Scheifele and try and find that next star who's, just still playing junior or that draft pick, and letting your staff see if they can't turn it into something. It would be a different philosophy than they're preaching right now, but I still think there's room for that philosophy.
Well, I think their teams are loath to go down the rebuild road because you're just signing your death papers as a coach at a GM, for at least admitting it. And 2, lastly, because we got about 90 seconds, about 90 seconds. I don't think it's the GM's job to set culture. I don't. I think it's the coach, and you hope he's going to be supported by the GM. Was it a breakdown between Pomo and Chevy? Because they're 2 great men that they just couldn't see eye to eye, or what's your summation of how that just didn't work out?
Well, I'm going to say I disagree with you on that, because I do think that there are obvious signs of clashes within the dressing room, and it becomes the general manager's room to maybe remove the issues, right? So the coaches that were dealing with Evander Kane for all of those years, they had to deal with Evander Kane. If they got to a point where they felt they couldn't deal with him anymore, I think then it's incumbent upon the GM to move that player out for the sake of culture. And I do think the Jets culture suffered for a number of years because of that. I've said this. I think that there was a tier system in place underneath Paul Maurice where there were certain players that were untouchable and other players that no matter what they did could kind of get, achieve what they should have been achieving based on what they'd given to the team. I think that tier system needed to be broken. And again, I guess if we are saying that it's incumbent upon the coach, Paul Maurice was around for a real long time. And from that 2018 year where the Jets looked like they were going to assume the crown as one of the best teams in the NHL, their results actually went down and down and down every single year after that until Paul Maurice was gone. If you're the general manager and culture has an issue to do with that, then it's incumbent upon you to address your coach. He didn't do that. The coach had to remove himself from the situation when it became apparent that things just weren't working. So I wouldn't let Chevy off the hook when it comes to culture. I think he's a big part of the culture that has existed in Winnipeg and really ultimately failed such a talented squad that had so much promise.
Great answer, great debate, and that's the one thing. When the situation's not going to change, what needs to change? You.
No doubt.
Pomo, and he's laughing now. Rennie, Sean, thank you for this. Rennie, appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on, Rod.